Thank you all for tuning into the Innovators Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Seth Narayanan, founder and CEO of Telliant Systems. Today on the Innovators Playbook, we are joined by Rodrigo Senra, VP of Engineering, focused on data and AI for Loadsmart, a next-generation logistics software company. Rod is a true innovator whose career spans continents and industries. Rod has led groundbreaking work in AI and machine learning, from revolutionizing logistics and supply chain management to building and scaling data science teams. He's been at the forefront of product development, consulting for major brands, and driving innovation in both startups and established companies. Beyond industry, Rod is a passionate educator, teaching data science and AI to both engineering and business leaders, and he has played a pivotal role in building the Python open source community in Brazil. With a unique blend of technical expertise, leadership, and a global perspective, Rod brings invaluable insights into how innovation happens in the real world. So, Rod, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Seth.
Excellent. Let's get started, Rod, with giving the viewers a little bit of a background about your journey. I know you grew up in Brazil and you got advanced degrees in computer engineering in Brazil, and then you've moved here. So give us a quick background of how you started and where you are, what took you to your current roles.
Let's try to compress 30 years in 2 minutes.
Absolutely.
I was always passionate about computing. I was like one of the kids in the 80s that the personal computing started booming, and the same thing happened in Brazil. So it was like passion at first at it. I started working with personal computers. I saw that was something I would want to do for my life. I entered one of the first courses for computer engineering, a class that was created at Unicamp, one of the top universities in Brazil. That was around 1992. I did my bachelor's degree, and then I continued the academic career, and I continued to do my master thesis and my PhD at the same alma mater. But because it was local, I was already engaged in the industry. I was working, and I negotiated at the company to be part-time so I could continue doing my studies and engage in the industry. In a way, it was off the beaten track for most talents in computing who left university, abandoned university, and went straight for the industry. I was still like divided between becoming a scientist and an engineer. So I tried to do both. I stayed in Brazil through like larger companies. I worked for global.com, which is a big news company in Brazil. I worked with Semantic Web there. Then I moved to EMC, a research facility. Then I was invited to the States for work in New York, which was a digital products company. And from then I was invited to Loadsmart, where I am today, to handle data and AI.
No, I know this is great. There's a lot of areas there which I might want to dive into, but talk a little bit about after you get your undergraduate degree, especially these days, people want to taste the industry. So what kind of kept you interested in academics and getting your master's and your PhD? That's a lot of commitment.
That is a great question.
Yeah.
What was in my mind at the time? So first, I was trying to find a way to differentiate myself as a professional. And I believed that if I had an accumulation of both hands-on experience in the industry, together with solid foundations for computer science, it would make me a more desired professional. So that was one thing. Second thing was Unicamp, similar to MIT or Stanford or Berkeley, is a university that is highly focused on research and connected to the industry. So by staying on that university, I continued to expand my networking, and I was exposed to the bleeding edge of research, which I also believed would be interesting. The reason then why I went to industry and didn't simply stay in academia was because Unicamp was a public university and most of its students are funded by scholarships. I wanted to have my own funding, and the industry is much better for funding. So that was the reasoning at the time.
Yeah, definitely takes a special person to delay your gratification, so to speak, of coming into the industry and not only making the money, but also all the exposure you would get in industries versus staying in academics. You definitely had a unique passion for the actual learning that you went through, which is pretty amazing.
There is perhaps more selfish reason as well,
Okay.
because staying connected to academia, I had access to the libraries there, and the researchers often invited luminaries from the industry to give courses and speeches. So I did a course about GCC with Richard Stallman. Leslie Lamport, the guy who created LaTeX and the
Yeah.
Paxos algorithm, visited Unicamp and gave a few courses there. So I had this contact by having an extended exposure in academia, 20 years there, allowed me to participate on these opportunities that if I had left, I wouldn't be.
Yeah. No, that's great. Jumping ahead to your current role, you're doing pioneering work in AI in the last few years and currently working at Loadsmart. Can you share your thoughts on what is the state of AI in your field right now, which is the logistics operations?
For sure. I did a little research about that recently, and we are leaving the boom of AI for the logistics industry. They are assuming the opportunity is around $20 billion for AI just in logistics, but only 10% of logistics companies already fully engaged in this bandwagon. There is still space to grow there. Loadsmart started by exploring AI of sorts. They had a dynamic pricing algorithm for their brokerage sector that allowed Loadsmart to put a price on the market automatically, and a price that was tuned by machine learning techniques that would make us profitable as a broker. So that was how Loadsmart got there. Today, besides a vertical of brokerage, we do have a SaaS offerings as well. So we create software products, and then AI is being introduced on those products as differentiation as well.
Interesting. And there are some big players in the broad AI landscape, like you take UPS or even Amazon, they have their own logistics side to them, and FedEx and those big guys. So how does a smaller company like Loadsmart stay and compete?
We don't compete on the space that these ones that you mentioned compete.
Yes.
There was a side for Uber Freight that's competed a little bit with us as well. Amazon in particular is one of our clients because sometimes they have backhaul of their trucks. They deliver, they don't want to come empty with their trucks.
Okay.
So we use them as a carrier company in some of the loads that we're moving for other shippers. But basically, there are many sectors in freight logistics. Let's restrict a little bit because logistics is like a universe. We're working on freight logistics in USA with some loads in Canada and Mexico. So it's much more restricted. And in that space, you have segments. So you have small and medium businesses, you have like enterprise segments. So what Loadsmart is trying to do is trying to find its niche and then target with a mixture of excellent service and technology where other companies are not exploring as well, and trying to penetrate the very difficult market of TMS, a transportation management system. So we do have products there. We have Shipper Guide, which is one of these products. And in Shipper Guide, we started to introduce AI as a complement to a traditional approach for TMSs. I don't know if you wanted me to go deep into the features that we're offering that AI connected, or just what segments we are targeting.
Yeah, maybe delve a little bit into how AI has helped within your product, and maybe then talk a little bit about how AI heading in the next year or two.
Okay. Yeah. So for the first part, we need to separate brokerage and SaaS, because for brokerage, it's two companies within Loadsmart. For brokerage, which is traditionally an analog approach, it's heavily based on relationships, like CSRs, they call carriers and they try to find the best price. ASRs, they know shippers and they sell us as a more trustworthy, robust way for them to move their loads. It's heavily social, very analog. And now AI is making us scale better in this kind of business and be more modern. So I can give you a couple examples. One of them, I already mentioned, was dynamic pricing. So when you have a particular lane and going from New York to LA, and what prices should I put? Price fluctuates a lot. We can do the analysis, the historical analysis for everything that is happening and understand what is the range which is attractive to a shipper, but it still can be profitable for us to hire a carrier to do the load for us because we don't have a fleet. We're just a broker.
Yeah.
The dynamic pricing, it's the key. Dynamic pricing is done with AI digesting lots and lots of data. So this is one approach for brokerage. Another approach for SaaS, Shipper Guide now, which is a TMS where shippers go, there's a marketplace, and they can pick and choose a diverse set of carriers, and they upload their shipments and then decide how to move. We are instrumenting that system with automatic optimization and with agents that you can talk to and can give you ad hoc analytics, or they can be your strategist and understand patterns in the freight that you're moving and then give you advice, such as in this lane, there's a market benchmark and you are a little bit above the market benchmark. You can purchase a little better. Or you could consider switching from full truckloads to less than truckload, which are two different modes of operation in freight, and you can save a little money. So this is a sub-product we call Freight Intel AI, which is a digital analyst, if you will, embedded in the TMS to try to help shippers to make decisions faster and more reliably. The second part of your question is what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
In AI, 2 or 3 years, it's like an eternity because things now are changing every week. I never saw this pace of change in any technology in the last like 30 years. And it was interesting because I lived a little bit of the winter of AI where people got disillusionment with the promises. And I'm glad to be still alive and working to see this comeback.
Yeah.
I can tell you maybe in the horizon of a year, I think it's safer to do a prediction. I would say that we will start to see a lot more of voice interfaces. These things that I just described to you, I think they will become a commodity in majority of systems. I'm certain all our competitors are doing the same thing that we're trying to do right now, which bring AI to give you automation, to make it easier for you to reduce complexity. So this would be my projection for the next year or so. AI becoming everywhere, and we use more voice as an interface.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I am exposed to healthcare, and there is a lot of AI that's coming into the digital health space. And from listening to you, it's useful in so many areas within logistics, and all the industries are going to get increasingly penetrated with AI technology. And do you see bumps in the road along the way? Talk a little bit about, because as with all the promises, you also get a lot of hype. And it's a overcharged environment of investment. And as recently, NVIDIA is taking ownership in companies, and it seems like they are buying their revenue almost. So there is some scary stuff going on. Small players like us might get caught in between some crossfires there.
That's a heavy loaded question.
Yeah.
But first of all, I think because of the pace of AI is so accelerated, the hype was accelerated in the same proportion.
Yeah.
And now we're running a risk that we never run before because the pressure for adoption and taking that to production, it's higher than any time in history. That means some of the understanding of the dangers of the technology are being overlooked. So if you remember, not long ago, we had a similar thing with atomic energy. So end of Second World War, there's a lot of pressure for the creation of the atomic bomb. Soon after that, it was atomic energy. And then we had a couple of accidents.
Yeah.
Russia and Japan are the most notable ones, but we had minor ones elsewhere. But even then, the pace was much lower and there were many safeguards. Every business has its safeguards. And right now, what's happening is that we're injecting AI in production, but we're not having the time to build the proper safeguards. One that everybody knows, it's hallucinations derived from large language models. So we're still struggling. How do we tackle hallucinations? I believe that problem will get worse for the following reason. A lot of people that is using AI today in the market already have a non-AI background. So think computer science. I was a developer for many years. Right now I'm vibe coding and I'm using AI to code. But I do have that experience to back me up.
Yeah.
So I can take full benefit of asking Claude or ChatGPT and say, do this for me. And then I can still take a look and say, excellent or not so great. But the new generations, if they are just exposed to these and they don't have that background to do the criticism, what will happen then? So this is, I believe, what's going to happen soon. We'll face that crisis. This is risk number one. There is a lot of companies working on explainability of AI that may help.
Yeah.
So this is a good path, but we're not quite there yet. Second risk, the energy crisis. We are driving a lot of money and resources to compute. I recently saw a documentary in the US of the problems data centers were creating because we're building many data centers, and just the humming of the data centers are bothering the people who live nearby of the data centers. So I think this will be disruptive to the ecosystems in many ways. And the return over investment is still not that clear.
Yeah.
So there is a risk that in the end, AI will be great for us to make videos of like kids and babies. Maybe we don't see the return for the huge companies. They're putting big money on those. So this is risk number two. And unseen risks, such as social networks, we never saw it coming. The harm it could do to our kids in terms of like exposure or getting addicted and psychological problems. So there are things that we cannot even foresee.
Yeah. Not too long ago, I was listening to a program where they were talking about how one of these LLM ChatGPT, I think somebody was trying to get advice, and then you kind of run into areas where it almost like if you're suffering from depression or something like that, it starts to go in areas that can really give you bad advice and has caused harm. So there is a lot of risk here.
Yes.
And I'm a little surprised myself that over the last 2-3 years, there have not been some major lawsuits coming. Also, maybe in the intellectual property area, because a lot of things are being transferred around and we don't know who wrote the original content. And so a lot of bumps in the road, I think, are still to come. We can talk about this all day, but yeah, let's move on. Another one of my favorite topics, which is leadership and team building. You've been in the industry, you've managed several teams. So what are some of the keys to assemble a high-performing team, especially in a very competitive area like AI and data science?
That's good. My formation was a technical one. I was trained to be an engineer, a software engineer more specifically. And I was never really trained to be a leader. These skills always come from outside. Recently, I tried to continue my education by studying the lives of great leaders. So I started hearing podcasts about famous people that were great leaders or reading biographies of those people. And then you start to see some patterns. So one pattern that you see, it's the humble leader. It's the leader that can admit at some point that they are wrong and that they focus more on the problems that the collective needs to solve than on his own image or his own benefit. And one factor or one example of this, one historical example, I would quote Napoleon Bonaparte. He was called Le Petit Caporal, the small corporal, because during battles, he went as a general, he went straight to the cannons and helped the foot soldiers. And he was like in the front lines. Same thing for Admiral Nelson from British Navy. So be there with the people that are solving the problems. Be part of the solution. Suffer with them. I think that is a great component for inspiring in terms of leadership.
Yeah.
Maybe a third element would be giving autonomy, like the art of delegation. Sometimes it's very tricky for you to, as a manager, take responsibility for the work of others. And then you give in the temptation of micromanaging. And the art of delegation means give them autonomy, help them to be successful, but give them space to be successful. I believe these are elements that conduce to a good leadership.
Yeah, excellent. I did read recently that there are a lot more younger people, especially the Gen Z, that are more so now than before unemployable in some ways, in that they come out having almost an expectation of not necessarily working hard, not learning. Do you find the quality of workers in general is going down, not just here, but across the globe?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe yes, but I risk saying that this pattern of our generation was and the
Yeah.
new generations never get it that hard or that tough. I think it's a repetitive pattern. I see that happening even in the generation of like my father's forefathers and so forth. So maybe we're just repeating the pattern. I'm over 50 and maybe I'm just getting on that age. So I don't know if it's confirmation bias there. The other factor may be a little bit of mismatched expectations, something to explain that pattern because the world changes. So it's not just that they are different, it's that education was different for them. When I was a kid, computers were introduced. When my parents were kids, televisions were introduced. But the course of my professional life, we had social networks, the internet. Now AI has appeared. I'm living on the sci-fi future of my childhood. We see electric cars, laser guns, satellites. So I don't know. I think there's a new generation that was born in a different world, and we have to adapt. We are putting our standards and our expectations from our experience and projecting that to them.
Yeah, I think increasingly, I think maybe COVID had something to do with it, in my
Oh,
opinion,
yeah.
that people are in, or especially kids are looking for meaning and looking for purpose in what they do. In my
Absolutely.
generation, from what I remember, is we were happy to get a job with a multinational big company, and that was kind of adequate for us at that point, from our perspective, and money was good. But nowadays, they are like, I'm going to do this for you. Is it going to help me in some ways, or is it going to help the world in some ways? As a business, if you're not engaged in something that is helping the world, there are a lot of social responsibility and ownership the kids have these days, which is sometimes questions in their mind on whether or not they should take a job and work on it.
Yes. Well, one thing that just occurred me is that the acceleration pace we just discussed, it happens also towards our expectations. So today we expect people to be brilliant, to communicate clearly,
Yeah, that's true.
be successful before 25. And if they are not, then we maybe label them. The world should refocus a little bit, give more slack to people.
Mm.
We're too demanding. I think capitalism caused this hunger, success, an
Yeah,
accelerated hunger for success that is not sustainable.
that's right. The main currency in capitalism is money, right? And when you can't motivate people with money alone, it becomes complex, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. The other big area that we are interested in, and I know you are, is innovation and product development in general. So you worked in small design organizations, boutique organizations, have consulted with some large companies like Virgin Atlantic, IKEA, Google, etc., to create new products. So in your opinion, what drives successful innovation in technology?
Right. There's a combination of factors. I think the most obvious one that everybody kind of repeats, it's work on the correct problem.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're simply working on the wrong problem. That is true in physics, is also true in the software industry. The second thing is resource limitation. So when you talk about innovation, be limited, be constrained. It's really, I think, the biggest motor for innovation. To give a concrete recent example, we had OpenAI, very well-funded company, many resources, did a great job with the GPT models. But then you see China coming with DeepSeek
Yeah.
out of the blue, and suddenly they have like similar performance in many areas and much, much cheaper, consuming less resources. Why? Because of the constraints that particular squad was enforced in. So I believe the key for true innovation is maybe those constraints, which force you to think out of the box, out of the obvious solutions to the problem when money is not a limitation or people is not a limitation.
Yeah. And being very purposeful about what problem you are trying to solve and that you're solving it the right way. And that problem is big enough that somebody is gonna want to spend money to buy that product, right? So
Yes.
when ChatGPT came around, I don't know if they did a problem analysis. They did what they did because technology allowed them to do it, but it really opened the eyes of a lot of people like us that this is something that can scale big in so many areas, in healthcare, in behavioral areas, and in your industry for that matter.
Yeah, I just thought about another good example. So if you look in the 60s, Kennedy in the United States set a goal to
Yeah.
put people in the moon. And then they gave those people a budget and then a time frame. You have 2, 3 years to put a man in the moon.
Yeah.
And that's brought incredible innovation. If you look at the rocket and lunar module, the computing power, it's less than we have in our wristwatches
Yes.
today.
Yes.
And yet they did all the calculations that was needed with those things.
So
I think it's
you-
a good example.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned that because our whole family is really big into rocket, and because we live in Atlanta, Huntsville is only about 4 hours from us, and we've gone there many times. And my son got us a ticket. They just launched Apollo 13. I'm sure you've seen it.
Sure.
So I just saw that a couple of weeks ago. And how, talking about innovation, how they solve the problem of when that spacecraft gets into trouble. And without giving the ending away, those engineers get together in a room and solve that problem in such an innovative way. It's amazing. All innovators need to watch that, I think.
For sure.
Yep. Okay, moving on to probably another big topic that's of big interest to you, which is teaching and academia. I know you are very passionate about teaching. You've been a teacher. Can you talk a little bit about what got you interested in teaching? So what excites you about that?
There are some things that we do at a point in our lives that we're intuitive about, and
Yes.
only later you have the opportunity to reason. Why did I do that? What were the real reasons? What drove me there? So at the time when I started teaching at PUC Camp, which is a university that lies beside Unicamp, it's a private university. I was still a MSc student at Unicamp, and I was already teaching undergraduate courses in computer science. And what I did was I wanted to have the experience as a teacher to see if I could do better. It was that cocky attitude of youngsters. I said, I can do better than some of these guys. Let me give it a try. So I asked the director of PUC to find a course for me to teach because I wanted to teach. And then he said, I give you a position for algorithm analysis because it's a hard course. I don't have many teachers willing to teach algorithmic analysis. And we are a private university. A lot of students cannot pass that subject. And then they bail out. And then we lose revenue. So finding a good teacher for this, it's critical. And I said, okay, so let me give it a try. So I started there. I was somewhat successful. I can't explain why. And then that director said, I will expand your courses. You're so successful in algorithm analysis. I will put you at the very first course, which is Introduction to Programming, because it's when we have the biggest margin of dropouts. And then I went to teach that. At the time, it felt like I was trying to prove something. Today, I know the reason attention is very addictive. As a teacher, you get it for free. Only later in the game, when I was teaching online courses, specifically those massive online courses that you don't see the people,
Yeah.
I noticed that it was little fun because you don't get the interaction with the students. You don't see them paying attention and asking questions and pushing you to be better. So attention becomes a coin to reward the teacher, and it's a KPI for the
Yeah.
teacher's performance as well. So
Yeah.
that would be my answer to the why. It's
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah, definitely. I think getting that student feedback is not only important to you as a teacher, but it also shows the outcome of the education that students learn more when it's a little bit more interactive.
Exactly. The point that you mentioned, the interaction for effective learning, has been proved by psychologists using computers as a teaching medium. So young kids were not responding well with teaching programs because of this social psychological factor that when there's no human to human, the youngsters don't get connected
Yeah.
because they need the social human context.
Yeah. I know. I look back to my days in college. We used to have one professor, I still remember, he was very passionate about teaching. And in those days, he would write on the board with a chalk. And then
Yes.
if somebody was not paying attention, he would nip off a little end of that chalk.
I had the same experience.
Yeah, it's funny.
And one other answer to your question for what is the reason to teach, another answer is to really understand something. Because I notice that as a student, sometimes the best course of action, if your ROI will be the grades, the incentive you have are the grades, the best thing you do is to study the teacher, not the subject. So
Yeah.
when you study the teacher, you know what they are going to ask about, and then you can have great results. You're very focused on the problem. But if you really need to understand something, becoming a teacher of that subject,
Yep.
you never know what the question will be, and you'll be exposed for not being able to answer. So you really need to understand that thing inside out to
Yeah.
be prepared to answer any question. That is the ultimate exam. Teaching is the ultimate exam. So because of that, I also wanted to teach, in particularly algorithm analysis, because it was a tough subject.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've heard that. I've seen that a lot where when you are put in a position to teach, I think you learn the subject a lot more thoroughly. And as you communicate to teach, that sort of opens up some channels in your brain, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Next thing I want to talk about is Python, the language, which is very widely used now in AI and ML. You have a long history with the Python language, and I know you were very heavily involved when you were in Brazil and started a community there. So can you talk a little bit about the language itself maybe and why you got interested in it?
So it's interesting that two completely different paths at the same time led me to Python around 1997. So one path was the academical path. I was doing a master thesis in computational reflection, a topic that today almost nobody knows about. Java had a package called Reflect, which got it a little popular. There was something called aspect-oriented programming, which was a fad, but also went in that space. But at that time, it was beginning. So it was a valid domain for research. And I started to research how programming languages incorporate this aspect of computational reflection, what affordances they give to introspect and change code itself, a code that changes code. So that was my line of research. And I explored many languages. And Python was one of those languages at the time that was offering good reflective mechanisms. So that was one of them, one path. The other path was in the industry. I was already working as a software engineer, and we mostly worked with C. We were developing system software and device drivers. We did lots of networking, monitoring, things like that. And I noticed that C was a great language. However, it was not optimized for speed of the developer. And I needed a programming language that optimized for speed because you want robustness, flexibility, all attributes in your artifact, but you get the most reward for the time to market. And the biggest cost at the time was developer time. That was the biggest factor. So if we could reduce developer time, then we're making money. And I realized that there were options to C. And Python was one of those options because Python interoperated with C very well. It was designed to be natural, to extend Python with C, which was not true for other competitors such as Java or Perl. Extending them was a nightmare, but Python was super easy. So in the industry and in academia, both led me to Python at the time, but few companies were using Python at the time. It was unheard. So for us in the industry to sell a software artifact based on Python had some rejection 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Not today, but 25 years ago. So I don't know, this is a toy language. What's that? And then creating a community, we create awareness, and then we can sell our products without the resistance because we give that robustness. And so I started engaging with the community because I translated the Python tutorial from English to Portuguese. And then I organized the first Python conference in Brazil in 2005. And then we created an association to sponsor the conferences. So one thing took to the other. And I started giving speeches, talks in shorter local meetups and conferences all over the place. And addicted to it, the attention factor again, and also the networking. So I started doing these talks. And when I saw 10 years went by and I'd done over 100 talks and I was deep into Python, and it was the greatest bet I ever done in my professional career because it paid off beautifully.
Yeah, but I guess when you were doing that, AI was probably still not a factor, right?
At the time, no. AI was a bad word. AI was a curse word at some point. It meant you don't even know what you're doing. It's purely academical. And we were able to flip that table.
Yeah. I can talk to you all day about that and everything, but I know you've got other things to do. So let's briefly talk about what is your advice to the next generation coming up? I know it's a big topic, but
yes. Okay, I'll try to give 3 tips.
Okay.
Tip number 1, learn AI, but also learn how to do things without AI. So go deep, understand the problem. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, always be curious. Go deep. Try to understand things as much as you can. Don't be shallow. We have one problem today that the pressure for results drives us for, okay, and now I have a result. Let's move to the next thing. Try to go deeper, which is an extension of the first one. And the last one, be ethical. We see a crisis in the world right now. The world is very polarized, and we invest little time discussing more philosophical aspects, such as what's right and what's wrong. I remember a class in philosophy by Professor John Searle. He said there are 3 problems in philosophy: the problem of knowledge, the problem of ethics, and the problem of governance. In that order, they are increasingly more difficult. So I urge everybody to invest time into ethics and understand and do not obey blindly and make a judgment. These are my advice.
That is phenomenal. I think I get a lot of advices, but rarely I get ethics and being ethical and integrity as a core pillar of what you need to focus on. That's great advice.
Yes, it's so hard because we are very tempted to give in due to pressures. We lie to ourselves. We make concessions. But then if we really give in to temptation, we may wake up and realize we became the enemy. We became Darth Vader. We give into the dark side. So it's really important to be ethical.
Excellent. Great advice. So, Rodrigo, you've been very generous with your time.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you personally, and thanks for coming on this Innovators Playbook podcast, and we will see you soon.
Same. Thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.